speaker today is Joan Kelly Group, and Joan is the CEO and team leader. She has turned that company into a premier real estate organization in our area, and through her concept that every member of her group would be a specialist, specializing in the myriad of communities in our area, with Joan as a specialist about Sun City, and each would be a specialist in a complex, particular dimension of the real estate business. They specialize in buying and selling, marketing and financing, investment properties, primary residences, and second homes. And they will do that both horizontally and vertically, including all the real estate adjacent topics, like how best to stage, what remodeling and repairs maximize return, and how to best facilitate moving out and moving in. She can tell you how to sell a little higher, buy a little lower, increase your return on fixing things up, and how to avoid problems, and maybe the best way to save a few bucks doing all of that. So please welcome our Money Talks resident realtor, Joan Kelly.
Good morning. So today what we're going to try to share is all things real estate. Okay. So navigating today's real estate market, and we're going to cover briefly the Sun City market update, which I give every month, and not a lot has changed. So we'll go through that fairly quickly. We'll talk about contracts, commissions, the new legal landscape, prepping your home to sell for maximum return on investment, home sale implications, taxes, protections, and the logistics of moving. And we'll also just touch on the recent tax reassessment in Jasper County, and we can, hopefully it'll put some people's fears at bay. I've gotten a couple of calls where people are concerned they're going to have skyrocketing taxes, they're going to have to move. I can assure you that is not likely what's going to happen. So we'll touch on that at the end. We're going to cover a lot of different subjects. I would ask, so that we can make sure we get through all this, if you can make a note of any questions you might have, and we'll answer those at the end of the meeting, if that's okay. So this is the summary for the Sun City market through last year. We saw 9% increase in new listings, almost 26% increase in closed sales over the year before. The median sales price was down 3.5%. List price receipt is running pretty steady at that 97%, and days on market is up almost 100%. So as of the end of the year, we were at 97 days on market on average. So through May, we've actually seen a drop in the new listings coming on the market. Closed sales still up 5.6%. Median sales price down again another 1.9%. And percent of list price received around that 97-98%. Days on market though, now at 147, so it's up significantly on average, but we're going to talk about that in more detail. Okay, wanted to give, let's see, I think it was last month or the month before, I gave a sort of an example of someone in Sun City who had listed their house higher than what we had recommended. They listed with a different agent, and didn't do the things that I consider important to get their house sold. They were on the market for 6 months. They had a dramatic the price reductions, the listing expired after 6 months, and then it sold, we listed it, got it under contract in 2 weeks, but they lost about $50,000 over the course of that time frame. So wanted to bring up 2 new examples where it brings out that whole point of pricing and prepping the house correctly. I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Hello. Hey. All right. Hey, I'm Mike. Thank you, everybody. Been serving you coffee for about 2 years, so it's nice to talk to you. These 2 examples of these homes are home number 2. I'll go over in a second. That's actually the one that I listed. Home number 1 is Tara's. She did suggest a price. This was on Belvedere. Suggested a price of $625. She kind of dug her heels in. They listed at $659, 901. You can see they had 2 price reductions, $649.9 to $640, and she drew the line in the sand at $640. Well, we got an offer at $640. At $633 was the net. Okay, she turned that down. And then another one at $607. So they decided, after 6 months, the home did expire, and she relisted with another agent at $610. Okay. Now again, Tara's suggestion was $625 from the beginning. Got an offer over asking of what that would have been at the time. She relisted at $610. 3 months, 2 more price reductions. So now look where we are, $659 to $570. She settled for $558 with 11 months of carrying costs. You can't see that at the bottom. So 13 months after the original list date, $75,000 was lost on the first initial offer that she turned down, plus 11 months of carrying costs. So we know what we're doing. We watch this stuff every day. You might look at this stuff, maybe once or twice a week. I probably spend 4 hours a day looking at these numbers. And this is what drives the price. This is the second example. This is my house on Brayton. It was listed for almost 1 solid year at they started at $599. They went down to $579. Look at the price reductions, 3 price reductions. She called us up. I told her $550. She was hesitant, and I said, I'm not going to list over $550. We went in, we staged the home, we cleaned it, we did small improvements on it, right, Joan? That's what we did there. I got an offer in 10 days, really in 7 days. We're closing tomorrow. Now, she had that house for a year, and it just sat holding costs for a solid year. So the suggestion works, staging works, and cleaning the house up really works too. Any questions? Oh, we're going to save that.
Sorry.
I don't know what the rest of that slide is, but I will go over.
Oh, it's gone.
Yeah, it's not on there. So what we're seeing now, guys, is buyers gaining a little bit more. Well, they have gained power a little bit more. It's not listing the home anymore, getting an offer in 5 days, having 7 cars in the driveway, overbidding on your house. That's gone. Okay? There's certain pockets, maybe Hilton Head and Bluffton, that it's still happening in, but not necessarily in Sun City. So we're seeing between 15 and 20% of all contracts written in last year fell out. That's a very high number. Buyers are walking away. Not only are they walking away, they're walking away with huge earnest money deposits being forfeited now. We just knew somebody recently that walked away from $10,000 to get out of the contract. So they lost $10,000. So we're seeing a very high rate of canceled contracts. It's not just sales that they have more, it's more of an even on. It's been repairs, concessions, things they're gonna fix, closing costs, and move-in dates. We're writing a lot of contracts where the buyers are kind of controlling the situation in this area, more so than last year. I'm not saying it's totally in their favor, I'm just saying it's more balanced. It's not as like it was a year, 2 years ago, for sure.
Yeah, and I think what I would like to say as far as contracts falling out, buyers are really skittish right now. And it doesn't take much for them to get nervous and want to, they're afraid of making a huge commitment. And the uncertainty in so many fronts, with the economy, with the war, all of these are things that really have an impact on what the real estate market does. And real estate does not like a lot of changes, and it has made people hesitant to move forward. We've had higher interest rates than we've had in a long time, much, much lower than when probably most of us bought our first houses. But it's high compared to, people got used to, 2-3% mortgage rates. So these are all things that are making buyers really hesitant to move forward. And I think Tara and Mike can talk to the fact that when they have buyers coming into town, they show them a lot of houses over and over again. It takes a lot to get them to pull the trigger. In terms of one thing I wanted to mention about contracts, in our market, there are 2 different contracts that are being used. Historically, it was the Hilton Head contract. The majority of the state uses a state contract. And years ago, Hilton Head decided that they were different and they needed something custom for them. And we've used that for years. In the last couple of years, there's been a movement towards doing the state contract, and we've got both in play right now, and they're very different. The Hilton Head contract, when you go under contract on the Hilton Head contract, it says you have the right to do an inspection and you request the repairs, but the seller is only obligated to fix things that are electrical, mechanical, plumbing, or structural. And if the buyer wants something done that isn't in those categories, too bad. They are obligated to stay under contract or walk away and lose their earnest money. The state contract is very different. There's a due diligence period, and the buyer can walk away for no reason. So as a seller, we really prefer, when we're representing sellers, we prefer the Hilton Head contract. However, we do not have the right to dictate which contract a buyer or a buyer's agent uses. But there is a difference, and so you just need to understand that those are some of the intricacies that can vary, and we try to negotiate on your behalf to minimize that risk. If, to minimize the buyer from walking away during that due diligence period. And on the state contract, time is of the essence. There's not automatic extensions. Everything has a deadline, and if you don't meet those deadlines, you technically can fall out of contract immediately. So it's incumbent that the agent representing you is keeping an eye on those dates, because if it slips, the buyer can walk. So those are just some of the intricacies that agents are dealing with right now that kind of make the real estate market a little bit more challenging.
I just wanted to say one more thing. Buyers, I think they're getting a little bit more cocky now too. I might say that. They don't care, and they're starting to lowball offers left and right. I put an offer in on the island, and I have to present the offer regardless. It was $50,000 below asking. They didn't get it, but he didn't come up at all. So I'm just saying, they're just getting a little bit more confident with their offers, lower offers.
Oh, there they are.
Oh, good.
Yay!
Okay, so
Sorry
you'll
about
be getting copies of the slides, so,
We did cover that, but you're all right.
okay.
Okay, good morning. My name is Tara, and I've been serving you coffee with Mike for the last few years. So it's kind of different to be on this end of it. I'm Italian, so this might be a little hard for me to talk with a microphone and use my hands, but I will try. So the form I'm going to discuss today is a legal document that we have to have signed at our first substantive contact with a potential client. When I meet with people for the first time and we start talking real estate, you are my customer. And as a customer, I owe you duties such as honest, fair. I cannot negotiate for you, nor can I give you any advice. Until we sign a buyer's agency agreement for buyers or a listing agreement for sellers, I can be there to listen but not discuss anything beyond the scope of what is like a customer service. Once we sign that buyer's agency agreement, then you become my client. Then I work for you, I negotiate on your behalf, I can give you advice, I owe you loyalty, confidentiality. A seller becomes a client once the listing agreement is signed, and I work on your behalf. So this form that we have to have signed literally describes the different agencies that are involved, and it's your choice as a buyer or seller how you want to, what agency you want to have. So the first one is considered single agency. That's just pretty much what it sounds like. I'm your agent, I work for you, I represent you. That is a single agent. There's also a dual agent, and that is when an agent can represent both the buyer and the seller. It has to be disclosed, you have to agree upon it, and we have to have forms signed in that fact. The next one is called a designated agent, and that's kind of like I work for Keller Williams. So your relationship is not just with me, but it's with Keller Williams. A designated agency is we're both Keller Williams agents, or you're both EXP agents, or you're both RE/MAX agents, but one represents the buyer, one represents the seller. We still owe our clients the fiduciary duties, but we are under the same agency. And then the last one is a transaction broker, which means we could represent one, both, or none. So we can just do a transaction. If someone walks in my open house, I'm representing the seller, but if they come in and want to put an offer, I can become their transaction brokerage. I can't negotiate for them, but I can sure present it to them. And that's what a transaction broker is. So we have to have this signed. This is by no means a contract. All it is a form that lets you know what the different agencies are, lets you know that when you're working with me, you're actually working with my brokerage. I think that's pretty.
Yeah, but what I want to stress on this is people are very hesitant to sign it. And this document, what the explanation that Tara just gave, is supposed to be the first thing that you talk about when you meet with a buyer or a seller. And we do this at our listing appointments, and I've had people say, whoa, I'm not ready to sign anything. I said, the signature is just acknowledging that I explained this to you. No obligation whatsoever, it's not a contract, but the state can audit us and say, okay, you met with, Sally Smith, and I want to see the signed agency explanation. And we can get in a lot of trouble if we're not explaining this up front. So what I found when we go on listing appointments if we're not the only, company that they're talking to, they'll say to me, I didn't sign anything before. I just wanna tell you, every agent you talk to should be asking you to sign this document. And it doesn't mean that you're obligated to them in any way, shape, or form. When, at the time you go under contract or make an offer on a property, it's gonna ask you again. I'm checking that agency was explained to me and that I saw this document. So I wanna stress that because we see it all the time where it's not being explained up front, and honestly, that's illegal.
And what I do, this is a 3-page document. The last page on the very bottom where it's grayed out, it literally says, this document is not a contract. And I circle it and show them, and they feel more comfortable signing it. Just saying that I explained to you what the different agencies are.
And this is gonna be editorializing. Dual agency is perfectly legal. We don't practice it. Our team doesn't practice it. I do not believe that you can serve two masters. Because if we bring the buyer and the seller, I can't, in a dual agency situation, give advice to either party. I know the motivation of both parties, and in my opinion, it is not fair to the people involved. The biggest thing that we do for people, the biggest service that we provide is being able to advise you on negotiation, on price, on all of that. And I can't do that if I'm a dual agent. We get phone calls all the time from people who will call us, I'm interested in 123 Main Street, of one of our listings. And they said, I only work with the listing agent. And I'm like, you do realize that the listing agent has a fiduciary duty to the seller. I do not understand. There's a myth that goes along with this, that people believe they're gonna get a better price if they're dealing directly with the listing agent. We see it a lot, and one time I spoke to somebody in Sun City, and he said, this is how I've always done it. And I said, okay, but you're not being represented. And after I got off the phone, I looked up his house that he purchased, and it was obvious to me. He overpaid. He overpaid on the house. Now, there's a belief that if you work with the same agent, they're gonna discount their services. So they may, and they may not, they may, but if they do, that's gonna be, or it can be, small potatoes compared to what you're maybe losing on the negotiation for the price and terms. It's not just price, it's price and terms. So that's editorializing. There's agents who will do dual agency. We don't practice it. And if somebody approaches us on one of our listings, we will turn it over to another agent on the team so that everybody gets representation. Okay, real estate commission and compensation. So, there's been a lot of changes over the last couple of years. In 2023, there was a lawsuit brought by sellers in Missouri who felt that they were not represented correctly because they didn't feel it was fair that they should pay a buyer's agent commission. The thing that makes me craziest about this is when those sellers bought that house, I guarantee you, the seller, when they bought, paid their agent's commission. It is how things have been done for 100 years, and in my opinion, it worked well. Are there cases where it was not explained well? I'm sure that that's true too. So there was a lawsuit brought, and they were claiming that realtors colluded to do price fixing on commissions. And they won, and there was a $1.8 billion settlement that was brought against the National Association of Realtors and several major brokerages. The net result on that is that no longer could commission be disclosed in the MLS. Now that wasn't something that was in the public MLS, but when we would bring a buyer to a property, we knew, it was documented, how much that seller was willing to pay a buyer's agent. So that was totally eliminated. So now, it is up to buyer's agents to negotiate on their own behalf. What also changed in the last year is that we could not, what we called co-broke. So when you used to sign a listing agreement, whether it was for 5%, 6%, 7%, whatever it was, the listing agent would share the commission with the buyer's agent. They took that away. There's no such thing as co-broke now. So, when you list, in the listing document, we say this is how much we charge to be your listing agent. And it is up to you what you want to pay a buyer's agent. There's a couple of different ways of handling that. You can say right up front, I'm willing to pay a buyer's agent X%. And when you say that, we can share that information with other agents. We can't share it through the MLS, but we can let other agents know, yes, the seller is willing to pay X% to a buyer's agent. The other option is, you can say, I'm willing to pay a buyer's agent, but I want them to negotiate. And tell them that when they submit the offer, they should submit their request for compensation. So there's two different ways, at least two different ways, of dealing with that. So. When making an offer, most buyers in Sun City request that their buyer agent compensation be paid out of their, okay, so I was just talking about on the listing side. When you're a buyer, buyers sign a buyer agency, and the agent tells the buyer what their fee is. This has become hugely confusing in the market in general, because buyers will say, well, I don't want to sign this because I don't want to have to pay the fee. The reality is, I don't know of too many cases where the seller has not paid the buyer's agent commission. But we can no longer show property to a buyer until a buyer signs a buyer agency agreement. That agreement can be for one house, it can be for one day, And the way we approach it is, typically we've just met, and we don't have a relationship. So you don't know if you're gonna wanna work with me, I don't know if I'm gonna wanna work with you. So it's actually okay to say, we're just gonna have this for today. And then we'll decide, do we wanna work together? And then you can say, okay, we'll extend the period of time. What buyers are most concerned about is, if the seller is not gonna pay commission or not gonna pay the entire fee that the buyer's agent is asking for, that they're gonna be stuck paying their buyer's agent, some or all of the commission. The reality is, at the time you submit an offer, you ask for the compensation, and then if the seller says, no, I'm not going to pay that, you're not obligated. So we've had cases where the agent asks for their compensation, the seller doesn't agree to it, offers, it's a negotiation. They offer a certain amount, and then if the parties don't come together, the contract doesn't go forward. So no one's going to get caught accidentally having to buy a house and pay their buyer's agent. But it is extremely confusing. There's a lot of agents who don't feel comfortable having these conversations with their clients. And so it really complicates things, or it can complicate things when there's not an agreement up front. And so we've done it both ways, where the seller has said up front, share with them, it makes the transaction go smoother. And I should have said this right from the beginning. Commissions are and always have been negotiable. That has always been the case. And when it comes to buyer agency, we, as a state, have always required that buyers sign a buyer agency agreement. What has happened in practice is agents don't like having that conversation, so agents would show property, and then at the time they're writing an offer, they have their client sign the buyer agency agreement then. That is no longer, that was never supposed to be that way, but it absolutely can't be that way today. It needs to be signed before property is shown. And then in the case, the commission for a seller is stated in the listing agreement at the time you list your house. So, in our experience, the majority of Sun City sellers do agree to pay the buyer's agency compensation. Commission is negotiable. Oops, go back. And, brokerages may have their own policies on setting commission, but, excuse me, I know this is very confusing, and I'm sure I'm happy to answer any questions as we get through the rest of the presentation. But that real estate has gotten very litigious, and I was just at a conference last week, and I can tell you all these changes that have taken place have not really changed what people are paying and what agents are getting in terms of compensation. There has not been a significant change. And so what I heard last week is the lawyer who brought the original lawsuit is considering reopening the lawsuit and bringing another one, because his goal is to change how commission is handled. And so in a forum like this, we actually don't get into specifics about what percent people pay, because it is, at the end of the day, it's negotiable. Okay.
All right, it's my turn. So what's the old saying about a house? Location, 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 right? That's the one thing you can't change. You're selling a home. It's where it is what it is. If it backs up to 170 or maybe 278, that could be more of an issue, possibly another house, but you can't change that location, correct? What you can do is adjust the price accordingly and make the condition better. Deep clean, what do you call it, Joan? Q-tip clean?
Q-tip clean.
Q-tip clean, staging, declutter, whatever it is. You know, something as simple as paint is probably the least expensive, but you don't know how many houses we go into that just simply need a paint job. And you could do it yourself. I mean, it's not like it's, wiring or AC. So that is the number one thing. I'd say the easiest, lowest cost to getting the correct condition correct. How do we determine the price of a house? Slide.
Okay.
Okay. There you go. All right, so we do, what I do, what they call a comparative market analysis or CMA on a home. I do pick 6 months of previous sales to go back and see. Sun City, I will say, for pricing wise, you have models here, right? The models are repeated. It's not like this is, these are custom homes in Rosedew or Belfair. So you do have a model to pull the data from. So we go back about 6 months, and then we take that data, and then we look for your upgrades, the view, the condition, what you've done to the home, okay? That's how we come up with pricing on the home. The age of the roof, the age of the AC. These are the things that are really important to the buyers. We do come up with we try to keep a pulse of what's happening in the market. We do look at homes that are currently listed that are similar to yours. But at the end of the day, those aren't sold homes. I like to compare them to actual evidence and closed sales. That is your comparable. You can say, well, I have a screen-in porch and he doesn't, and we're both priced at $550, or whatever it takes. I'm still looking at a closed sale. I will reference active homes. Do you agree, John?
Absolutely.
Okay. But, the closed sale is the best way to come up with the price of your home. We do monitor, we ask for feedback constantly. Not everybody gives it. We do try to be diligent on that, and see what other realtors are saying when they bring buyers to the home, what the buyers are saying, why they didn't purchase the home, why didn't they make an offer. If you, per the National Association of Realtors, you can see, come up in a second. If you have 10 showings and no offers, or go 2 weeks without a single showing, you are likely overpriced. Our job is to sell homes, it's not to list them. We want to sell your home because you want to sell your home. So our job is to sell it, obviously, for the most money possible, but also in the least time possible. We really don't want to list a home that says, oh, just list it, we'll see what happens. That's not really our job. It takes a lot of money to list a house these days. Thousands of dollars. Photography, staff, staging. So I just think in the beginning, listen to the comps, listen to the evidence, and then we'll see what condition is after that.
Yeah, some of the biggest challenges that we see are, we came out of a market during COVID when prices skyrocketed. And when we meet with sellers, they'll say, my friend down the street sold at this price. Well, it turns out they sold in 22. And that's not today's market. I mean, that market during COVID, people were going over asking price, waiving inspections. I mean, they were agreeing to anything that would make their offer more competitive, because we were in a, many multiple offer situations. We use the same technique that an appraiser uses to determine and make adjustments looking at the sold comparable homes. And then we look at what the competitive situation is. So in some cases, and I'll throw dogwoods under the bus, we've had a lot of dogwoods on the house on the market at the same time. So that's a very competitive situation, and you have to see where you're priced versus the other competition are on the market, and how does your home compare? So what your neighbor thinks, what your neighbor's house sold, what your, whoever. We were in a meeting last week where we asked the seller, we always start by saying, do you have a number in mind? And frequently we hear, well, we want to hear what you're thinking. So we both agreed that $599, $600 was the right price. So we said, okay, well, we'll come back with all the paperwork in 2 days. Come back. All my friends have said, I'm selling way too low. And I'm like, we showed you all the data. You have to use the data to make good decisions. So it doesn't matter what you have to net, because maybe it's not the time for you to sell. Maybe you want to rent until the market gets better. I would not advise that right now. The rental market, for whatever reason, I mean, this is the first time that I can remember where the rental market in Sun City is very soft. So the data is what the data is. The buyers are not going to overpay unless you've got something about your home that is unlike any other home on the market. You're not going to be able to get away with that in this market.
So, what are buyers looking for these days? Tara and I have a lot of buyers, right? We have a pool of, I don't know, a couple hundred probably. What are they looking for? They're not looking for to do any work. They don't want to come in that house and do anything. And I'm not talking small things, but if you've got a kitchen or a bathroom that's needs renovation, look at the demographic that's in here, all of us. We don't want to do a kitchen reno on a house, right? We don't want to do those things. They don't want to do those things. So kitchen and bathroom, I'm not saying that you have to gut the house, but if you have a little bit of wiggle room and you want to update the kitchen and bath, those are the two things first and foremost that they're looking for. LVP, hardwood throughout, obviously everybody would love to have that, not everybody does. Maybe in the main living areas you can get a consistent floor. Maybe, I understand the bedrooms, still have carpet and stuff, but you just make sure that the flooring is in good shape. That's a big expense and it's a hassle. So people do want to see that. This is a funny one, the screen lanai or room addition. I can go either way on this, but they do love that Carolina room or whatever. You play in Florida, they call it a Florida room. So, but here it's a Carolina room. The screened porch, I don't care if it's 140 degrees. People want a screened porch. The house on Brayton, the one that I took over, had a Carolina room that she converted from a screened porch, and the first 3 people that looked at it said, I wish there was a screened porch again. So they don't care, even if it's a lanai with the sliding windows, with the vinyl, something to that effect they really, really want. But if it's screen, that's fine too. Newer appliances, whether, you know, stainless or, now they're probably changing again, but we'll go back, you wanted white with gold.
Yeah,
but,
the white with the gold.
yeah, that's not happening. And patio, obviously an outdoor kitchen or fireplace, that's great. These are the maintenance items to the right, Joan, if you want to click that. So these, on the right here, on maintenance, so those are the upgrades on the left. The maintenance items, I'll just go through them in a minute. The functioning items of HVAC and water heater are maintenance. They're not upgrades, okay? Those are things that you should be taking care of. There you go.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Those are things that should be taken care of. They should be serviced regularly. They should be on hopefully on the newer side. But you know, having a new AC is not an upgrade. It's it's going to separate you from other people, but that's a maintenance item that should happen. Same thing with a roof. That's newer. Hopefully a clean stucco report. If you replace your stucco, you know, and have it re-stuccoed and everything's taken care of, it's not necessarily an upgrade. That's a maintenance item. You have to do that. You're not going to sell your house with bad stucco. Right?
Right,
Sure.
I agree.
Sunstone high-value upgrades, flooring, same flooring. You know, I understand we can't do that in all cases. That would be great. Tile and carpet, kind of moving out, but we still see a lot of it. People still buy homes with tile. It's all good. You know, but if you have the capacity, LVP is where it's at. Paint, fresh neutral paint. Try to get in one color if you can. That would be great. You know, multiple colored rooms is a little bit of a challenge. Again, kitchen, countertops, cabinetry, appliance packages. Zero, I just spoke to a gentleman, right? He said he had the zero entry shower in the primary bath and then a screen lit eye. So if you're looking, you know, those 5 things I think would probably be, you know, the highest return on investment ROI.
So, not everything, to get your house ready for sale, I'm not gonna tell you, if you're ready to sell now, I'm not gonna tell you upgrade your bathroom, upgrade your kitchen. But if you're thinking, I might like to enjoy this, or what are the things that I could do to increase the value of my house that I can enjoy for as long as I'm gonna stay here before I move? Kitchen and baths are always the big ticket items that really are a wow. We always talk about how we would love for your house to have 3 wows and no distractions. And so bathrooms and kitchen certainly can be, or your view can be a wow. There's also low cost things. As Mike mentioned, paint is a big one. There was a house recently listed that was on the market for 6 months, multiple price reductions. It expired, came back on the market, painted, and unfortunately with a $25,000 price reduction. If they it didn't even look like the same house. All they did was paint, and it looked like a totally different house. Had they done that from the get-go, it probably would have sold where they had originally listed. But now, days on market is not your friend. The longer you're on the market, the less you're going to get. So when you say, I want to try this price, if it's not way out from what we're recommending, we'll say, fine, we're only gonna give it a couple of weeks. The most activity that you're gonna get on your listing is gonna be in that first 30 days. So don't squander that first 30 days being at the wrong price.
Well, then, and buyers also, when they see a home sitting, what's the first thing they say? What's wrong with it? Why is it there? There's got to be something wrong with this house. We hear it every day.
Yeah, there's other low-cost things that you can do depending on how dated your house is. So paint is one. replacing some of the light fixtures. You know, Amazon is awesome. We've bought light fixtures for well under $100 that have just been really updated a house, changed the hardware on your kitchen cabinets. Again, this all depends on what you have. In some cases, if you've got kitchen cabinets that are really not in favor right now, we may recommend that you paint them. It's an investment, but there are certain kitchen cabinets that buyers just absolutely are like, okay, that's going to be something that I have to address, and they don't want a reason. It's what it would fall under the category of distraction. Okay. So the psychology of staging. I am a huge fan of staging. You don't necessarily have to do a full-on, I mean, if you're living in the house, you're not going to be able to do that anyway. But the whole rationale behind staging is that only 10% of buyers can envision furnishings in an empty space. And 83% of buyers say they can visualize living in a home more easily when it's staged. The thing with staging too is there are some floor plans that are notorious in here where people come in and they have no idea how to arrange their furniture. And so we just had a situation where our client wasn't open to staging initially, and after doing 2 price reductions, we said, rather than do another price reduction, let's get it staged. And it was an empty house. We used a staging company, and actually these are the pictures from that house. Within 7 days, it was under contract. Staging has a huge effect, especially if your house is dated. When you walk into an empty house, everything, all the I don't want to call it defect, but all of the challenges are very obvious when the house is empty. They've got nothing else to look at. You put a whole bunch of model-like furnishings in, and people are going to get distracted in a good way.
Is that the same house right there?
That's the same house. So 49% of agents note a faster sale time on staged listings, 20% fewer days on market on the average staged home. I'm sorry.
Pays for it.
Who pays the
Pays for the
stager?
staging.
Oh, so that's negotiable. I'll put it that way. So there's, again, it's different if you have a vacant house. We actually have staging inventory. And we will do, if you're living in the house, we'll do vignette staging, where we'll bring in towels, lamps, I mean, things that'll update a house. We can do what we call vignette staging. That's just a service that we offer. But you can get up to 70% higher sale price on a staged listing. So, as I had said earlier, I took a course on staging over 10 years ago, and the number one rule on staging your house is Q-tip clean. People don't want to walk in and see a dirty house. They also will think that you haven't maintained the house if it's not clean. Things you need to look at are clean your baseboards, clean your kitchen cabinets where you're constantly opening the door. You know, there's a lot of time it's discolored around the hardware. Your doorknobs. Look at the area around your doorknobs, the trim. I mean, when we go switch plates,
That's a big one.
yeah, these are things cost you nothing. And it makes a big difference on the presentation of your house.
I always say the filters that are above, because anyone walk in and look up and see a dirty filter, know the house is dirty. Change it right away. They see a clean filter and they think, oh,
Your ceiling fans,
yeah, ceiling fans.
you know, if
Clean
they've
'em.
got, yeah, it's not rocket science. I mean, you want the house to sparkle. You want to depersonalize, remove all personal items. If you have collections, you're moving. Box them up, get them out of the main living area. Put them in the garage, put them in a storage unit. You want your house to look spacious. If everything is crammed in your house, they're gonna say, there's not enough room. There's not enough room, there's not enough storage.
And nobody cares that there's stuff in the garage. Put it in the garage,
Yeah.
nobody cares.
The garage is the last place people are going. When a buyer walks into your house, they have an impression in the first 45 seconds, whether or not this house is potentially something that they're interested in. They go through the entire house. By the time they get to the garage, honestly, I mean, straighten up your garage. I don't care about the garage, quite frankly. It's the rest of the house that's really important. As I said, anything that is, if you don't see it in a model home, get rid of it. Box it up, donate it, whatever it is you're gonna do. Get rid of extraneous things. We go into a lot of houses where there's lots of little pieces of furniture that get into the way, the flow, the traffic in your house. We will tell you, get rid of this piece of furniture. Again, we're not gonna ask you to move giant pieces of furniture, but we want the house to look spacious.
Did somebody say tchotchkes over there? I don't know. You probably should get rid of a few of those too, right? You don't need a bunch of the tchotchkes, we call
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying,
them.
collect.
If you went to Niagara Falls in 1970, that's fine. Put it in a box. Probably might not need it anymore.
And I hope this isn't gonna offend anybody in here, but the doll collections,
That's what I was getting at. They might be nice, but it might not be somebody's flavor. That's
no,
all.
exactly.
What tips do you have regarding landscaping?
Okay, definitely coming to that. That was on this page. Curb appeal. So curb appeal is really important. Not too long ago, somebody pulled up to one of our listings, they scheduled an appointment, they never went in the house. They said they didn't like the way it looked. And I'm like, it was, in my opinion, it looked like 50% of the houses in Sun City. There wasn't anything that was objectionable. We had done things like, we put down fresh mulch, we trimmed back the landscaping. The other thing that we do is, we will walk around the house, we know what kinds of things are gonna get called out on a home inspection. Always gets called out if you have any plant material touching your house. It needs to be away from the house. So that needs to be done. We try to get all that done before we list. While we're opening the lockbox, your clients are standing there and they're looking around. Make sure that your front door is appealing. If it needs a coat of paint, pretty easy just to paint your front door. Look for mud daubers, all of this stuff. You should probably not every home needs it, but you probably need to do, a soft wash. You want everything to look clean and presentable and in its, put its best foot forward. Yeah, clean the windows. We've had some where, you know, it's after pollen season, and there's pollen all over the windows. Not a good look. Okay. Oh. Okay.
You got taxes.
Oh, that's right.
And
Okay.
then me.
Okay. Okay, taxes. So, if you're a primary homeowner, as a single person, you can exclude up to $250,000 of gain. As a married couple, you can exclude $500,000. So one thing that, you have to have lived in the house 2 out of the last 5 years. One thing that we tell people, if you're leaving and you're moving to another state, we recommend not changing over your driver's license until your house closes. That's not always possible, I get it, but one of the things that happens at closing is if you've changed locations to a different state, some attorneys will say that they want you, because you're no longer a South Carolina resident, they're gonna withhold 6% of the gain. And you'll get it back if it's your primary residence, but you have to file your South Carolina tax return to get that back. There's a form, it's called the I-295, and there's a box you can check that says, I qualify for this tax exemption, so we don't want taxes withheld at closing. If it's a second home and you've left the state, they're gonna withhold it, and you're gonna have to, this doesn't apply, the exclusion, if it's a second home. Estate structure, talk to your attorney on whether or not it makes sense. The reason that you put your home into a living trust is that it avoids probate. And probate right now takes 6 to 9 months in Beaufort County. It could take a year or 2 in Jasper County. So it may not make sense for you, but it does save some work on the part of your heirs if it is in a trust. Okay, I'm gonna try to get through this. Okay. All right.
Okay, closing costs. I'm gonna go over seller closing costs. There's a big myth, and I hear this from a lot of my sellers. Sun City charges an exit fee to sell in Sun City. That's not true. So we're going to go over closing costs with you. So the first thing you're going to have a listing agent commission. Of course, we just talked about how negotiable that is. There's also the buyer's agent fee, which is also negotiable. The fee that I'm assuming most people are thinking is Sun City charging, it's called deed stamps. That goes to the county and to the state, and it boils down to 0.37% of the purchase price. So based on a home that's $500,000, that fee is roughly $1,850, so $1,850. So that's called deed stamps, and that is your exit fee paid to the county and to the state. The next fee, and it is a seller fee, it is mandatory by the state of South Carolina, 30 days before closing. It's called a CL 100. Most CL 100s are about $150. And what that does is measure for termites, carpenter bees, ants, beetles, and wood-destroying fungus. If there is a problem with your house, it is a seller's responsibility to repair it. The other fee would be your attorney's fee. I think we have it listed. I mean, pretty reasonable, 700 to 1,000. That's on the high end. I've seen it less than that, but the seller's attorney prepares the deed transferring ownership to the new owners, plus all their trust certificates, and the notary and such. The negotiated repairs, I know we don't have it on there, but I did write it down, because the buyer is going to have an inspector come in and they're gonna send you a list of what they want repaired. Most of the time, it's not very significant, but it is part of the seller's responsibility to do anything that's structural, plumbing, electric. It has to be a sound roof free of leaks. So those would be a seller fee also. We have down here negotiating the closing costs of Sun City, that transfer fee of $3,500 plus a 2/3 of 1%. That is truly, we are seeing a buyer's fee. Of course, it's negotiable, but I'm gonna tell you, in all the years I've done it, I have never had one of my sellers pay that fee. We listed in our MLS as it's a buyer's fee. Again, totally negotiable, but I do throw that onto the buyer's side. So going on to the next set of fees, which is the buyer's fees. The buyer's fee is their lender cost of financing. Of course, that has nothing to do with us. And the lenders will charge their different fees depending on their rates. Title insurance is set by the state, is optional if you're purchasing with cash. If you're mortgaging, you're probably going to be paying title insurance. If you're paying cash, you do not, but we do suggest it. Basic policy at $500,000 home is about $1,170. Attorney's fee, again, a little bit higher on a buyer, $1,100 to $1,400. I think $1,400 is kind of high, but $1,200 is pretty average for everything that the attorney does for a buyer. And then again, I threw on to the buyer side, $3,500 is the community enhancement. 2/3 of 1% on a $500,000 home is $3,340. So I always kind of prepare my buyers on an average price of $500,000. They're going to be between $6,500 and $8,000 to welcome to Sun City fee. That's it.
One tip that I'm gonna throw out there is, when we talked about prorated taxes, one of the things that we do that I don't see done a lot is that if you are a second homeowner and you're paying 6% taxes, when you do that tax proration and it's at that 6% rate, that's a big number. And if the buyer comes in and fills out all the documentation to become a resident, the tax bill when it comes is gonna be at the 4% rate. I have always asked that the buyer and seller sign a tax proration agreement that if that happens, where the proration was at 6% and the buyer was at 4%, that the buyer agrees to reimburse the seller for that overpayment. So what I found happening was some attorneys wouldn't allow their clients to sign that agreement. So the last contract we did, I wrote it into the contract and said, I made it part of the contract that the buyer is agreeing, because we realized that what the seller was gonna have to pay was going to not only pay the entire year's taxes, but then they would be pocketing extra money. So that's just a tip to keep in mind if you're, if it's not your primary residence. Planning your move, and we're almost at the end here. Planning your move, start early. Talk to an agent as much as 3 to 6 months before you intend to list, just so that we have an opportunity to come through and give you ideas on things that you might want to do to get ready. If you own a stucco home, absolutely you need to get a current stucco inspection. Be prepared for a longer timeline than anticipated. It can take longer to do pre-listing repairs. One thing we're starting to do is have a handyman come through and look for the things that frequently show up on inspection repair requests, and the handyman can then repair those at that point. Once it is found on a full-blown buyer inspection, they're gonna ask for licensed licensed electrician, licensed plumber, and those types of things can be done by a handyman ahead of time, so it'll pay for itself. And it's something that we do recommend doing. The last thing that I was gonna talk about was the Jasper County tax reassessment. A lot of folks were concerned that their taxes were gonna double and triple. That's not the case. Even if your house doubled, let's say your house doubled in price, or value, I should say. The number that they're going to use is capped at a 15% increase. So if you had a $400,000 valuation, and the new one came in, we'll take an extreme situation, 800,000. It's only gonna be a 15% increase on the value for tax purposes, okay? So it would take it up to, oh gosh, I should have picked that, 15. So
I don't have my phone, I
460.
have my calculator.
So and what's likely to happen, what I expect to happen every time there's been a reassessment is, in this case, taxes, values have gone up, so the mill rate is going to come down. So those two things work opposite each other. So you're not gonna see the massive increase in your taxes that you may have thought by looking at the new value. Because look for the capped value on that, and on that notice. This is both Jasper and Beaufort reassessed every 5 years. So we should be coming up on Beaufort soon, but yeah, maybe. So anyway, so that concludes what we had planned for today. And if you have any questions.
Yeah, I apologize. The executive committee needs to meet at 12:30. I'm sure Joan and her folks will stay here as long as you have questions, so don't be afraid to come up. In the meantime, Joan, one of our Money Talks silver dollar plaques. And thank you for that. Thank you, everybody.